The anonymous millionaire my son sold all my jewelry to impress was me. My name is Margaret Whitman. And the day I discovered my jewelry was gone was the day I realized betrayal often comes, not from strangers, but from those we give everything to. The morning light slipped through the sheer curtains in my living room, scattering gold across the carpet. It was supposed to be an ordinary day, but something felt off from the moment I woke. Perhaps it was the silence in the house. A silence that wasn't peaceful but heavy. The kind that makes your stomach twist even before you understand why. I had a ritual. Every few weeks, I would open the safe in my study and check on my jewelry collection. To others, it might have looked like vanity, but for me, it was something else entirely. Those pieces weren't just ornaments, each one told a story of my life. The sapphire brooch was a gift from my late husband on our 10th anniversary. The emerald earrings from the year I finally retired after decades running my boutique. And the pearl necklace belonged to my grandmother, passed down like a silent blessing. When I turned the dial that morning and swung the safe door open, I expected the familiar gleam. Instead, my breath caught. The velvet boxes were scattered, some empty, others completely missing. My fingers trembled as I pulled them out one by one. The ruby ring, the diamond bracelet, gone. At first, I thought I was mistaken. I crouched down, checking behind the shelves, convinced I had simply misplaced them, though I knew I hadn't. Panic began to rise in my chest, hot and suffocating. My collection wasn't just wealth, it was memory, it was identity. The realization that someone had taken it felt like someone had carved out parts of me. And then another realization followed, darker and heavier. Only two people knew the combination to that safe. Myself and my son, Daniel. I sat on the edge of the chair, staring at the gaping safe as though it could explain itself. My mind spun, trying to make sense of the impossible. Daniel was my only child. I had raised him through scraped knees, exam failures, heartbreaks. I gave him every advantage I could, even when it meant working late nights and giving up my own comforts. He knew what those pieces meant to me. He had watched me polish them, listened to the stories behind them. Could he really? The front door opened. His voice carried into the house. Casual, almost cheerful. "Mom, you home?" I quickly closed the safe, trying to steady my breath. My heart hammered as he walked into the living room, his phone in hand, laughing at something on the screen. He looked so ordinary in that moment, so much like the boy I remembered. Yet my eyes caught something new, his sneakers. White, spotless, expensive, not the kind I had bought him last Christmas. "Morning," he said, kissing my cheek distractedly before flopping onto the couch. He didn't notice the tension in my shoulders, the way I was studying him as though I'd never seen him before. "Daniel," I said softly, my voice steadier than I felt. "Did you go into my study?" He glanced at me, frowning. "Study? Why?" "I was just asking." I watched him carefully. He avoided my eyes. "Because some things are missing." "Missing?" His laugh was too quick, too light. "Like what?" I swallowed hard. "Jewelry." The silence that followed stretched between us, taut like a rope about to snap. He shrugged, leaning back, his expression carefully blank. "You probably just misplaced it, Mom. You're always moving things around." I stared at him. I had never misplaced a single piece in 20 years. "Daniel," I said again, quietly. "You know the code to the safe." His jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. "And? You're saying I took it?" His voice rose, defensive. "God, Mom, do you even hear yourself? That's insane." I wanted to believe him. Every part of me screamed to believe him. But those new sneakers, that phone in his hand, the faint cologne I'd never bought for him, they told a different story. Still, I forced myself to smile faintly, to nod. "You're right, I'm probably overthinking." He relaxed immediately, scrolling on his phone again, muttering something about meeting friends later. But as he disappeared into his room, the faint laughter echoing from his phone, I felt the first crack of certainty. My jewelry was gone. And deep down, I already knew who had taken it. I returned to the study, sitting in front of the open safe once more. I pressed my palm against the cold steel, closing my eyes. This wasn't just about jewels. This was about betrayal. About the possibility that my only son valued vanity more than the history, the sacrifices, and the love I had given him. The seed of doubt had been planted, and I knew it would only grow. For the first time in my life, I looked at my son, not as my child, but as a stranger. And that terrified me more than the empty boxes in the safe. The morning after I discovered my jewelry missing, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. Sleep had been shallow, filled with restless dreams of locks breaking, velvet boxes scattering, and my son's face turning away from me. When the alarm clock rang, I sat up and stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint sound of Daniel moving around the kitchen. He was humming, of all things light, casual, as though the world were entirely at peace. I knew I couldn't let the unease eat away at me silently. I had to ask again. But I also knew that if Daniel truly had taken the jewelry, I couldn't expect the truth to come easily. Lies, when spoken by those you love, have a way of slicing deeper than knives. I entered the kitchen, and there he was leaning against the counter with a cup of coffee, scrolling on his phone. His hair was still damp from a shower, and he was dressed better than usual. A crisp button-down shirt, designer jeans, even a leather belt that gleamed. I knew that wardrobe. I had worked in fashion and jewelry long enough to recognize quality, and Daniel had never been able to afford that kind of quality on his own. "Morning, Mom," he said casually, taking a sip without looking up. "Morning," I replied, my voice soft. I stood there for a moment, watching him, the steam rising between us from the mug. "Daniel, I want to ask you again about the jewelry." That made him glance up. His expression flickered annoyance first, then something cooler, more guarded. "Mom, we talked about this yesterday. You probably misplaced it." I shook my head. Number I didn't. My tone was firmer this time. "Those pieces were in the safe, and now they're gone." He set his phone down on the counter, his posture stiffening. "And what? You think I took them? You think your own son would steal from you?" The word steal hung between us like smoke. My heart squeezed painfully. "Daniel," I said carefully, "you're the only other person who knows the code. If you're in trouble, if you need money, you can tell me. You don't have to." "Jesus, Mom," he cut me off sharply, his voice rising. "Do you even hear yourself? You're accusing me without proof. You've always been so paranoid about those stupid jewels." Stupid jewels. The words stabbed me. Those weren't trinkets from a mall counter. They were fragments of my life, love, milestones, heritage. And my son, the boy who had grown up seeing me polish them with reverence, dared to call them stupid. I bit my lip, swallowing the pain. "Daniel, I'm not accusing you. I just need to understand." He threw his hands up, pacing. "This is ridiculous. Maybe you forgot to lock the safe. Maybe someone broke in. How should I know?" But I had checked the locks. No forced entry. The house was untouched. Whoever took them knew the code. I studied his face. He was sweating slightly despite the cool morning air. His eyes darted to the window, then back to me, never settling. He was lying. I could feel it. But here's the cruel thing about lies from someone you love. Even when you know they're lying, part of you desperately clings to the possibility that they're not. That maybe, just maybe, you're wrong. I softened my tone, stepping closer. "Daniel, if you did take them, just tell me. I won't be angry. I just want the truth." His gaze snapped to mine, and for a fleeting second, I saw something: guilt, fear, maybe even shame. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by indignation. "I didn't take anything, Mom. Drop it, okay?" He grabbed his phone and stormed out of the kitchen, the door slamming behind him. I stood there, staring at the half-empty mug of coffee, my hands trembling. My son had lied to me. I had no proof, no witnesses, but I didn't need them. A mother knows. That day, I wandered through the house in a fog. I opened drawers, checked closets, as though the jewelry might magically appear. But deep inside, I knew it was gone. Sold. Maybe. Pawned. And Daniel was out there pretending as though nothing had happened. By evening, he returned, laughing into his phone, carrying a shopping bag with a brand I knew too well. Luxury. Too much luxury for a boy with no stable job. He tried to slip past me, but I caught the bag out of the corner of my eye. "What's that?" I asked, my voice cool. "Nothing," he muttered, shoving it toward his room. "Daniel." He froze, then turned, plastering on a smile. "It's just clothes, Mom. A friend gave me a discount." Discount. The lie tasted sour even as he spoke it. I said nothing, only nodded. But in that silence, something hardened inside me. I realized Daniel wasn't going to confess. He wasn't going to apologize. He was going to keep spinning his web, expecting me to believe. I went to bed that night with my heart heavy. Betrayal doesn't happen in one instant. It happens in layers: a missing bracelet, a new pair of shoes, a lie spoken with too much ease. And as I lay there in the dark, I understood something that made my stomach churn. My son had crossed a line. And once a line like that is crossed, there is no going back. The days that followed were like watching a play where I already knew the ending, yet couldn't look away. Daniel's transformation wasn't sudden if you measured it by weeks or months. But once my eyes were open, I saw it clearly. He was living a life that no young man of his means could sustain. A life dripping with indulgence bought at my expense. I first noticed it when he waltzed into the living room with a new watch gleaming on his wrist. It wasn't the kind of watch you pick up at a department store. This was precision-crafted, heavy, deliberate in its elegance. I had spent decades appraising jewelry and luxury goods. I could spot authenticity in an instant. "That looks expensive," I remarked casually, not taking my eyes off the book I pretended to read. He grinned, rotating his wrist so the light caught the polished face. "A gift," he said smoothly. "From a friend." I lifted my gaze. "Quite a generous friend." He shrugged, clearly enjoying my attention. "What can I say? People like me." That was the first moment I realized something chilling. Daniel wasn't just taking from me, he was enjoying the thrill of deception, the illusion of wealth and admiration. Soon, the signs multiplied. Nights out that lasted until dawn. Restaurant bills left carelessly on the counter, their totals larger than my grocery budget for the month. He came home smelling of cigars and expensive cologne, clothes reeking of bars and nightclubs. One evening, as I was folding laundry in the living room, his phone lit up on the couch beside me. A message preview glowed across the screen. "Bro, can't believe you pulled up in that car." She was staring all night. I froze. Car? We didn't own a luxury car. I walked to the window and parted the curtains. There it was, parked by the curb. A sleek, black sports car, gleaming beneath the streetlights. Utterly foreign to our modest driveway. When Daniel came in, keys dangling carelessly from his hand, I asked, "Whose car is that?" He smirked, tossing the keys onto the table. "Borrowed. A buddy wanted me to test it out." But his eyes betrayed him a flicker of pride, of ownership. He wanted me to believe he was moving in circles where such cars were casual toys, where money flowed like water. And with every lie, he grew bolder. I began piecing together the pattern. The missing jewelry wasn't an isolated act of desperation. It was fuel. He had sold what wasn't his to fund this lifestyle, to carve a place among people dazzled by superficiality. He wasn't just taking my possessions, he was rewriting his own identity, brick by stolen brick. One Saturday afternoon, I overheard him in the backyard, his laughter carrying through the open window. He was with friends, boasting loudly. "Yeah, I've got connections," he said, his voice dripping with bravado. You wouldn't believe the people I know. Old money. Serious money. They see something in me. My heart tightened. Old money. Serious money. He was constructing a fantasy, casting himself as a chosen protege of some invisible benefactor. I leaned against the wall, the sunlight warm on my face but my chest cold. He was lying to his friends the same way he lied to me, and perhaps, in the process, lying to himself. The most painful moment came when we went out for dinner together, a rare occurrence lately. I had suggested a quiet, family-owned Italian place, but Daniel insisted on a rooftop lounge downtown. The kind where the prices are unlisted and the waiters wear suits. He arrived late, sliding into the booth across from me, with a cocky smile, dressed in another designer shirt. His friends joined us without asking, young men and women with shallow laughter, their eyes flitting between cocktails and selfies. "Mom, order whatever you like," Daniel said loudly, waving at the waiter as if he owned the place. "It's all taken care of." I looked around at the sparkling skyline, the plates of food arriving like jewels on porcelain. Taken care of? By whom? With what money? I didn't ask, because I already knew. When the bill came, he snatched it up quickly, sliding his card with a flourish. His friends cheered, clinking glasses. And for a moment, I saw it, the satisfaction on his face, the intoxication of being admired. But what none of them knew was the cost. That the glittering diamonds funding their dinner chatter had once rested against my skin, on anniversaries and birthdays. That the rubies catching candlelight on their wrists and necks had been meant as heirlooms, not currency for temporary applause. That night, lying awake in the quiet of my bedroom, I realized the depth of the change. Daniel wasn't simply enjoying new clothes or fleeting luxuries. He was becoming addicted to the illusion of wealth, to the validation it brought. He was building a new life, one founded on betrayal. I stared at the ceiling, tears slipping silently down my cheeks. Was this my failure as a mother? Had I raised a son who believed appearance mattered more than loyalty, that money was worth more than love? The jewelry was gone, yes. But what hurt more was the growing sense that I was losing Daniel himself, not to drugs or crime, but to vanity, to ego, to a hunger that could never be satisfied. And I knew then that if I didn't act, he would spiral deeper. He would sell, not just what I owned, but eventually, what little remained of his own soul. Ending of part 3. Have you ever been in a situation like this? If you were in this situation, would you forgive or take revenge? Comment below to let us know. Suspicion is a strange companion. It doesn't knock on your door politely or announce itself with clarity. It seeps into your mind, dripping slowly, until every glance, every word, every movement is stained by doubt. After that rooftop dinner, suspicion no longer whispered to me, it screamed. I knew Daniel was hiding something far greater than I had allowed myself to admit. And so, for the first time in my life, I began to shadow my own son. It wasn't easy. A mother shouldn't have to follow her child like a detective on a case. But love and betrayal create desperate mixtures, and I could not sit idly while he slipped further away. The first step was simple. His bank account. Years ago, I had co-signed on his account to help him after college. He never bothered to change it, probably because he assumed I'd forgotten. But I hadn't. I logged in quietly one morning after he left. What I saw made my stomach churn. Large deposits, several thousands at a time, coming in irregular bursts. Then, almost immediately, withdrawals or transfers to vendors I recognized. Luxury stores, upscale restaurants, even a car dealership. My jewelry hadn't just disappeared. It had been liquidated, piece by piece, turned into quick cash to fuel his charade. I sat there, staring at the screen, my hands trembling on the keyboard. I had built that collection over a lifetime. Some pieces were insured, yes, but no insurance could replace the meaning behind them. And Daniel had reduced them to numbers on a bank statement, digits feeding his hunger for status. But numbers weren't enough. I needed to see for myself. The next evening, I told Daniel I had an early night and retreated to my room. From the crack in the curtains, I watched him leave dressed sharp, his cologne wafting even from the doorway, keys jangling with the confidence of someone who believed the world belonged to him. I slipped on a coat, waited 5 minutes, then followed. My heart pounded as I trailed his car at a cautious distance. The city at night was a blur of neon and taillights, but I never lost him. He eventually pulled up to a club downtown, one of those exclusive ones, where velvet ropes and bodyguards decided who was worthy of entry. I parked across the street, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I watched him stroll to the entrance, greeted like an old friend. He wasn't the awkward boy I once knew. He carried himself with the swagger of someone who believed he belonged among the wealthy. From my car, I could see him laughing, shaking hands, leaning close to whisper into someone's ear. Women in glittering dresses gravitated toward him. Men slapped his back with approval. He had carved out an identity a prince in a borrowed kingdom. But I also saw something else. His smile was too wide, his laughter too loud. It was the performance of someone terrified the mask might slip. I returned home before him that night, my body heavy with dread. I lay in bed listening for the sound of his key turning the lock. When it finally came, near dawn, I heard his uneven footsteps, the muffled thud of his shoes hitting the floor, and then silence. The next day, I dug deeper. Through an old contact from my days as a boutique owner, I traced one of the auction houses, listed on his bank statement. My pulse raced as I gave them the description of a diamond bracelet I knew too well. There was a pause on the line before the woman confirmed. Yes, that piece had been sold recently. She couldn't disclose the buyer, but the seller's information matched Daniel. I pressed the phone to my chest after the call, staring at the wall. The confirmation was both a knife and a balm. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. He had done it. He had stolen from me. But strangely, the truth didn't give me closure. It lit something else inside me resolve. If Daniel thought he could walk among wolves with my jewels as his ticket, he was mistaken. So, I began following him more often. Not every night I had to be careful not to raise suspicion, but enough to map his world. Upscale clubs, private parties in penthouses I'd never seen, even charity galas where he strolled in confidently, as though he belonged. And always, he was spinning the same story. I overheard him once, through the cracked door of a hotel ballroom, boasting to a group of men, "I've got someone backing me." An old money type, very private. They see potential in me, want to invest. I nearly laughed aloud in the shadows. His benefactor. He was inventing a ghost to justify his sudden wealth, pretending he wasn't a thief, but a chosen protege. But here's where irony has teeth. Because Daniel didn't know the identity of the person quietly buying back the jewels he sold. That anonymous millionaire who kept appearing in the background of his new life was me. The realization came slowly, but once it settled, it gave me clarity. I had to act not as a grieving mother, but as a strategist. If he wanted a fantasy, I would give him one. If he wanted to believe he had a powerful patron, then let him believe. And through that belief, I would show him the mirror he had avoided for so long. The nights of watching from shadows ended. I had seen enough. I now knew not just what Daniel had done, but the stage he had built to hide it. It was time to step onto that stage myself. There is a particular cruelty in hearing your child boast about a lie you know is built upon your pain. By now, I had seen enough of Daniel's nightlife, his new friends, his hunger for validation. But nothing prepared me for the moment when I heard him casually mention me. Or, rather, the persona I had created without him knowing his anonymous millionaire. Heh. It happened one Sunday afternoon. The house was warm with the smell of roast chicken. I had insisted on cooking a family meal, hoping to tether Daniel back to some shred of normalcy. He arrived late, his shirt collar slightly askew, his eyes hidden behind tinted sunglasses though the day was cloudy. Two of his friends trailed behind him, strangers with bright smiles, and the restless energy of people who feed off someone else's fire. I set the table, listening as they flopped onto the couch. Their conversation was loud, full of laughter and inside jokes. But then Daniel's voice dropped into that familiar tone of self-importance. "You guys don't get it," he said, leaning back, arms spread as though he were delivering wisdom. "I've got someone behind me. Big money, old money. The kind of person you never see, never meet, but they've chosen me. Chosen me." The words stung, as though he were speaking about some divine favor. One of his friends whistled. "Serious? Like, how big are we talking?" Daniel smirked, lowering his sunglasses so his eyes glittered with smug delight. "Let's just say, when I need something, it appears. I wanted into that gala last week. Bam. I was on the guest list. I sold some pieces very expensive, mind you. And guess who snatched them up? Same mysterious buyer. It's like they're collecting my work, investing in me. His work. My jewelry, my life's collection, my grandmother's pearls, my husband's anniversary gift, all reduced to stepping stones for his charade. I busied myself at the counter, my hands trembling as I carved the chicken. The knife slipped once, nicking my finger. I pressed a napkin to the wound, ignoring the sting. Pain was easier than listening to his lies. "Who is this person?" one of the friends asked eagerly. "You ever meet them?" Daniel shook his head with theatrical gravity. "Number, they like to stay in the shadows, but trust me, when the time is right, they'll step forward, and when they do," he spread his hands as if unveiling an empire. "I'll be unstoppable." Laughter and admiration followed, and Daniel basked in it, his shoulders squared, his grin wide. I stood there, hidden by the clatter of dishes, my chest heavy with something beyond anger. He wasn't just lying to me anymore, he was lying to himself, weaving a fantasy where betrayal turned into destiny. And I, unwittingly, had become the phantom figure that gave his delusion weight. But here is where irony curved into my favor. He didn't know the truth. He didn't know the anonymous millionaire he bragged about was the same mother he dismissed at home, the same woman he accused of paranoia. He didn't know that every piece he sold had been traced, reclaimed, and stored quietly away once again by the very hands that once cherished them. After dinner, when his friends had gone and the house was quiet, I confronted him not directly, but with subtlety. "You seem to be doing well lately," I said, pouring myself tea at the kitchen table. He grinned, stretching lazily. "Yeah, you could say that. Things are lining up for me." "Must be nice having someone important in your corner," I remarked. He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if testing whether I knew something. Then he smirked. "Yeah, let's just say I have powerful connections. Not everyone gets that chance." I sipped my tea slowly, forcing calm. "And what if those connections expect something in return?" He waved a dismissive hand. "Don't worry, Mom. I've got it handled." Handled. As though betrayal were a business deal. As though loyalty and bloodlines could be brushed aside for opportunity. That night, as I lay awake, I thought about what it meant to be someone's anonymous millionaire. It wasn't about money or status. It was about control, about influence. Daniel believed he was rising on the wings of privilege, but he was blind to the fact that the same wings could snap shut around him. So I began to play my role more deliberately. Each time a piece surfaced at auction, I arranged for it to be bought under the same alias, the same account. I let Daniel see the trail of breadcrumbs, reinforcing his belief that some hidden benefactor was watching. He strutted through the house, his ego swelling, his arrogance thickening like smoke in every room. But with each boast, with each lie, I tightened the noose. I remember one evening in particular. He was on the phone in the hallway, his voice low but excited. "Yeah, they're real, authentic. The buyer knows quality, trust me. This isn't some nobody. This is serious money, and they're interested in me." Me. I stood in the shadows, listening, my heart a mix of sorrow and steel. because I knew the day would come when the mask had to fall. When he would sit across from his so-called patron, expecting glory, and instead face the mother he had betrayed. But not yet. Not while his hunger still grew. I let him enjoy his fantasy a little longer, because sometimes the cruelest lesson is not in the sudden strike, but in letting the liar build his castle of illusions higher and higher until the fall is fatal. And I, his anonymous millionaire, was patient. There are moments in life when doubt is no longer an option, when the truth lands with such finality that it steals the air from your lungs. For weeks I had pieced together fragments: the empty safe, the designer clothes, the whispered boasts of an anonymous millionaire. But a part of me, the mother who once rocked Daniel to sleep, still clung to denial. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe the jewelry had been misplaced. Maybe he had simply borrowed money from friends. But then came the confirmation, the one that shattered even those fragile threads of hope. It started with a phone call. I still had acquaintances from my boutique days, people in the jewelry and auction world who respected me, who knew I could identify a fake at 20 paces. I had quietly reached out, describing a few specific pieces: my ruby ring with the engraving on the band, the diamond bracelet shaped like interwoven vines, the sapphire brooch my late husband had given me. One morning, my phone buzzed. I answered with a calm I didn't feel. "Margaret," the voice on the other end said, hesitant. "I think we have something." She described the pieces down to the engraving, the exact cut of the stones. They had been listed at an auction house not 3 weeks ago. The seller's paperwork matched Daniel's details. His name, his signature. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The room spun. Hearing it confirmed out loud was like being stabbed, not because I didn't know, but because the knowing turned into fact, undeniable and cruel. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. And the buyer? A pause. "Confidential, as always. But I can tell you this: there's been a pattern. Someone keeps purchasing all the pieces he lists. The same account. The same name on the papers. Quiet. Discreet. Almost as though they don't want the items to leave a certain circle." A chill spread through me. That someone was me, of course. My alias. My shadow self, reclaiming what was mine, while Daniel strutted through the city, boasting about his mysterious patron. The irony was so sharp, I almost laughed. My son, selling my treasures to the world, bragging about impressing an unknown millionaire, never realizing he was only feeding them back into my hands. When I hung up the phone, I sat in silence for a long time. The safe upstairs was emptier, yes, but my true loss was sitting in the room next door. My son, the boy I had raised with every ounce of love I could muster, who now looked at me not as a mother but as an obstacle to his performance. That evening, Daniel came home, with the smell of champagne clinging to him. He dropped a bag onto the couch, another designer logo. He didn't notice me at first. I sat in the armchair, watching, my face carefully blank. "Big night?" I asked finally. He grinned, loosening his tie. "You could say that. Your friends must be impressed." He smirked. "They should be. Not everyone has the kind of connections I do." I studied him. "Connections? Or are they just people willing to buy what doesn't belong to you?" His smile faltered, just slightly. He turned toward the kitchen, dismissive. "You're still on that? Mom, let it go. You're imagining things." I felt something inside me snap, not into rage, but into clarity. He was too far gone to confess. He was too entrenched in his fantasy to admit the truth. Lies had become his language, his armor, his currency. But I wasn't powerless. Later that night, when he was asleep, I sat alone at the dining table with a glass of wine and the folder of documents I had gathered: auction records, bank statements, even photographs of the jewelry listed under his name. I spread them out in front of me, like evidence in a trial. Because that's what this was: a trial of loyalty, of love, of betrayal. As I looked at each page, a plan began to take shape. If Daniel wanted to live in a world where an anonymous millionaire validated his worth, then I would give him exactly that. I would play the role he had invented, feed the illusion he cherished, and when the time was right, when his arrogance reached its peak, I would reveal the truth in a way he could never escape. But that would take patience, precision, timing. So, I began to weave my trap quietly. Each time he listed another piece, I bought it back under my alias. Each time he bragged about his patron, I encouraged the fantasy with a mother's nod, hiding the steel behind my eyes. Each time he strutted through the house like a king, I let him because the higher he climbed, the harder his fall would be. Yet, in those quiet moments, I still asked myself, why? Why would he do this to me? The answer was never simple. Greed, yes. Ego, certainly. But beneath it, I sensed something darker, an emptiness inside him that no amount of money or jewels could fill. Perhaps he thought wealth would buy him respect. Perhaps he believed status would make him someone worthy in the eyes of others. But all I saw was a boy who had traded his soul for applause. And so, as the days passed, my sorrow hardened into resolve. I would not let him continue unchecked. I would not allow him to drag me, my memories, and my legacy into the dirt. Because sometimes, love is not protecting your child from the world. Sometimes love is holding up a mirror, no matter how much it shatters them, and saying, "This is who you've become. Look at it." My worst confirmation was also my greatest weapon. And soon, Daniel would face it. I had the truth in my hands now. The evidence was undeniable, and the betrayal irreversible. But truth alone changes nothing unless it is wielded. Daniel was too wrapped up in his fantasy to face it willingly. If I confronted him with the documents, he'd deny, rage, twist the blame back onto me. No words alone would never cut through the armor he had built around his lies. So, I chose a different path. If my son wanted an anonymous millionaire, then I would become that role in full. I would give him the fantasy he so desperately craved, and I would use it to hold a mirror to his soul until he could no longer look away. The first time I played the part was almost accidental. Another piece of mine appeared at auction, my grandmother's pearl necklace, the one I had promised myself I would pass down to my daughter-in-law someday. Seeing it listed under Daniel's name made bile rise in my throat. But instead of collapsing into grief, I wired the money through my alias account, reclaiming it once more. When Daniel came home that night, flushed with victory, I saw it in his eyes. He believed his mysterious benefactor had taken the bait again. "They're watching me," he muttered to himself in the mirror as he adjusted his tie. He thought I couldn't hear, but I did. His voice was filled with awe, almost reverence. "They believe in me." The irony cut so deep it almost made me laugh. "Believe in you? No, Daniel. I was watching you drown in your own lies." From that moment, I leaned into the performance. Each time he listed a piece, I bought it back. Each time he bragged to his friends, I listened in silence, my face calm though my heart roared. And when he began to drop hints that his patron was grooming him for bigger things, I didn't correct him. I let the illusion grow. Because illusions, when stretched too far, eventually strangle the liar who spun them. One evening, he returned home buzzing with energy. "Mom," he said breathlessly, "you won't believe this. They bought again. The same person. I know it's them. It's always them." I set my teacup down, feigning mild interest. "Who?" He grinned, pacing like a caged animal high on adrenaline. "My connection. The one I told you about. They're following everything I do, Mom. They're building me up. I'm telling you, this is just the beginning." I studied him, his eyes gleaming with greed, his hands trembling with excitement. He looked like a gambler who thought he had discovered a system, unaware he was being played. "Be careful, Daniel," I said softly. "Not everyone who builds you up intends for you to stand tall in the end." He laughed, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. "You don't get it, Mom. This is destiny." Destiny. That word tasted bitter. From then on, I played both roles: the weary mother at home, pretending ignorance, and the silent patron in the shadows, reclaiming each jewel with surgical precision. I built a wall between us, brick by brick, watching him dance in the fantasy I had constructed. And as the weeks passed, his hunger only deepened. He began hosting parties at the house when he thought I was asleep. I'd hear the thrum of music, the clink of glasses, the shallow laughter of people who weren't there for him but for the wealth he projected. I'd peek down the staircase sometimes, watching him hold court, retelling the same story. My benefactor sees something in me. They know I'm destined for bigger things. They're just waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. And each time, I'd feel both fury and sorrow twist inside me. Because he wasn't speaking about some stranger, he was speaking about me. About the mother who had sacrificed so much for him, who had wiped his tears and paid his bills and stood by him when no one else would. Yet here he was, worshipping a phantom he believed in more than he ever believed in me. But I didn't stop him. I let him throw his parties, let him buy his suits, let him bask in the shallow admiration of people who would vanish the moment the money did. Because I knew, the higher he rose, the harder his fall would be. One night, after another auction, I sat in my study, holding the reclaimed sapphire brooch in my hand. The stone glowed under the lamp, as vivid as the day my husband had given it to me. I closed my fingers around it, whispering to myself, "Patience." Oh, this wasn't just about retrieving my jewelry anymore. This was about teaching Daniel a lesson no lecture could deliver. A lesson about greed, about betrayal, about the fragility of illusions. And so, I continued to play the role. I became his invisible empire, his silent applause, his imagined ladder to greatness. But what Daniel didn't know, what he could never have imagined, was that every step he took toward his fantasy was a step closer to my truth. Because one day soon, I would tear the mask away. And when he saw who had been behind it all, when he realized the anonymous millionaire was the very mother he had stolen from, then, and only then, would he understand the cost of his betrayal. For now, I remained in the shadows, watching and waiting. Power, when tasted, is like salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. Daniel's hunger was no longer subtle. It consumed him, reshaped him, and infected every corner of our home. At first, it showed in small gestures. He stopped thanking me for meals. He no longer asked about my day. Instead, he strutted through the rooms as if they were merely staging grounds for his performance. The quiet boy I once knew was gone. In his place was a man intoxicated by arrogance, a man who thought himself untouchable. But arrogance never stays contained. It spills out, stains everything. And soon Daniel's delusions began to poison not only his world but mine. One afternoon, I returned from the grocery store to find 3 strangers lounging in my living room. 2 young women with glossy hair. One man with a sharp jawline and sharper eyes. They were sipping cocktails, music pulsing from a speaker I didn't recognize. Daniel stood in the center, telling a story, his voice thick with self-importance. When I entered, bags in hand, the room barely acknowledged me. He didn't introduce me, didn't pause, didn't even glance. "Yeah, my patrons got connections you wouldn't believe," he said, gesturing expansively. "They're grooming me, see? Getting me into circles most people only dream about." The man laughed. "So when do we get to meet this mysterious millionaire of yours?" Daniel grinned, teeth flashing. "Patience. They like to keep things quiet, but trust me, when the time comes, you'll see just how powerful they are." My hands tightened on the grocery bags until the plastic cut into my skin. This was my house, my furniture, my air. Yet I felt like an intruder. My son didn't just erase me in that moment, he erased the truth, replacing it with a fantasy where I was nothing but background noise. I set the groceries on the counter louder than necessary. Daniel shot me an irritated glance. "Mom, can you give us some space?" he said curtly, as though I were a nuisance. The words stung like a slap. I turned away, swallowing the bitterness, but inside, something cracked further. Later, when the guests finally left, I found glasses abandoned on the coffee table, lipstick stains on my cushions, and Daniel slouched on the couch, scrolling on his phone. "You brought strangers into my home without asking," I said quietly. He didn't look up. "Relax, Mom. They're friends." "One. Friends who didn't even know my name," I snapped, the anger finally breaking through. He sighed dramatically, tossing his phone aside. "This is why I don't bring people around. You don't get it. You wouldn't understand the kind of life I'm building. The kind of life you're stealing," I corrected, my voice sharp. His eyes flicked to mine, cold and hard. For a moment, I thought he might lash out. Instead, he stood and walked toward his room. Over his shoulder, he muttered, "Just stay out of it, Mom. Stay out of it." As if my life, my jewelry, my sacrifices were none of my business. But his hunger didn't stop there. He began spending recklessly, flaunting new watches, shoes, and gadgets every week. Credit card bills arrived in stacks. Calls from collectors started coming, his debts mounting like storm clouds. But each time I asked, he brushed me off. "I've got it covered," he'd say smugly. "My patron believes in me. They'll take care of it." I wanted to scream, "That patron is me." But I bit my tongue. The time wasn't right. He needed to bury himself deeper, to reveal the full extent of his greed before I tore the illusion apart. The breaking point came one evening during dinner. I had cooked his favorite roast chicken with garlic potatoes. I hoped, foolishly, that maybe a familiar meal would bridge the gap between us. But when he sat down, dressed in yet another designer suit, he sneered at the food. "This again?" he said, poking at the plate. "Do you know how embarrassing it is to come home to this? My friends eat at Michelin-starred restaurants, Mom. Do you even know what that means?" I froze, the fork slipping from my hand. My own son, belittling me for feeding him, for trying to give him something warm, something real. I forced my voice steady. "Daniel, food isn't about status. It's about care." He laughed, sharp and cruel. "Care doesn't get you anywhere. Money does. Power does. And I have both now." In that moment, I didn't see my son. I saw a stranger wearing his face, a stranger intoxicated with illusions I had unwillingly fed. I excused myself from the table, retreating to my study before the tears could fall. Behind the closed door, I pressed my hands against the desk, my breath ragged. I had let him grow arrogant, let him drown in the fantasy of a patron who wasn't real. But now his hunger was spiraling, infecting every word, every action. He no longer respected me as a mother. He barely saw me at all. And yet, wasn't that the point? The higher he climbed, the more ruthless he became, the more undeniable his betrayal would be. When the moment came to reveal the truth, he wouldn't be able to escape it. The fall would be devastating. But I wasn't ready to strike. Not yet. So I endured the insults, the arrogance, the way he paraded strangers through my home and sneered at my meals. Each word was a wound, but each wound reminded me why I had to keep going. Because the greater his hunger grew, the closer he came to devouring himself. And when that happened, I would be there, waiting, to show him exactly who his anonymous millionaire had been all along. By the time Daniel dismissed my cooking as beneath him, I knew he had slipped too far into the role he had built for himself. His arrogance was no longer just embarrassing, it was corrosive. He wasn't merely lying to others, he was lying to me, to himself, to the very memory of the boy I had raised. But love, even when bruised and battered, refuses to die quickly. Some part of me still wanted to believe he could turn back, that beneath the arrogance, there remained a son who remembered my sacrifices, my love, my humanity. I told myself, if he's given the chance to tell the truth, to humble himself, maybe, just maybe, he'll choose differently. So, I decided to test him. The first test was small, almost insignificant on the surface. One afternoon, I left a small velvet pouch on the coffee table before stepping out to the garden. Inside was a gold chain. Nothing as valuable as the sapphires or diamonds, but still worth something. When I returned, Daniel was sitting on the couch, the pouch gone. "Did you see what I left here?" I asked casually. He looked up, feigning confusion. "See what?" "The pouch, with a chain inside." "Whoa." He shook his head with such ease it chilled me. "Nope. Maybe you misplaced it." That phrase again misplaced. The same one he had used when the jewelry first disappeared. I nodded, saying nothing, but my heart sank. He hadn't even hesitated. The second test came a week later. I left an envelope on the hall table, filled not with money but with blank papers folded to mimic cash. On the front, in my handwriting, I scrawled, "Mortgage do not touch." I returned from the market that afternoon to find the envelope missing. When I asked Daniel, he barely looked up from his phone. "Haven't seen it." I went to his room later and found the papers discarded in his trash bin. He hadn't even bothered to hide them properly. By then, the truth was undeniable. My son wasn't just reckless, he was dishonest to the bone. Even when given the chance to show me honesty, to spare me another cut, he chose greed. The third test was harsher, designed to pierce through his fantasy. I asked him, one evening after dinner, if he would help me with finances. "I'm worried about bills," I said softly, folding my hands on the table. "The house, the utilities. Could you spare something? Even just a little?" He laughed, actually laughed. "Mom, you don't get it. I don't do little anymore. I'm operating on a bigger level now. If you need help, maybe you should ask your mysterious millionaire friend." The words were so sharp they nearly stole my breath. He didn't know how close he was to the truth, how cruelly ironic his mockery was. I held his gaze, my face calm though my heart was breaking. "Daniel," I asked carefully, "if you had to choose between loyalty to family and loyalty to this patron of yours, which would you choose?" His smile was smug. "Easy. The patron. Family doesn't get you into penthouses or galas. Family doesn't buy your future." There it was, stripped bare, his priorities laid out like bones. He would trade me his mother, his only parent, for the ghost he worshipped in the dark. I excused myself, retreating to the study, closing the door with quiet finality. I sat at the desk, staring at the documents I had gathered, the reclaimed jewels now locked in a different safe. My hands trembled, not with grief this time, but with resolve. I had given him chance after chance, tested his honesty, his loyalty, his conscience. Each time, he had chosen greed, arrogance, betrayal. There was no saving him with gentle words or patient waiting. The boy I had raised was buried beneath too many lies. And so, the plan I had been nurturing in silence began to sharpen. If Daniel wanted to live for his patron, then he would meet them. If he wanted validation, then he would face it head-on. The dinner was already forming in my mind a perfect stage, a private setting where his illusions would reach their climax. He would walk in expecting to meet the mysterious figure who had elevated him, expecting praise, wealth, perhaps even promises of more. Instead, he would find me, the mother he had betrayed, the woman he had stolen from, the anonymous millionaire who had been pulling the strings all along. And when that moment came, there would be no more lies to hide behind. How do you think they will react when I reveal that to everyone? When a storm is about to break, the air changes. The sky grows heavy, the silence grows deep, and every instinct tells you to brace yourself. That was how I felt as I began to prepare for the confrontation. Every step I took was deliberate, every choice calculated, as though I were staging a play where I would finally step onto the stage, not as the quiet mother in the shadows, but as the hidden hand Daniel had been worshipping. The idea of the dinner came to me one night, as I sat at the dining table alone. The silence of the house pressed around me, punctuated only by the faint hum of Daniel's music upstairs. My tea had gone cold, untouched, as I stared at the flickering candle on the table. This ordinary place where I had shared meals with my husband, celebrated birthdays, comforted Daniel after heartbreaks would become the arena of truth. But it couldn't be ordinary. Daniel wouldn't come to an ordinary dinner expecting revelation. I needed to transform it, to make it glitter the way he imagined his new world glittered. The table would gleam with crystal glasses and polished silver. The candles would cast golden light across the dishes. The air would hum with promise. He would walk in expecting grandeur, believing he had finally ascended into the presence of power. I would give him exactly what he expected until the moment I pulled the mask away. The first step was logistics. I made calls, discreet ones, to old acquaintances in catering and hospitality. I ordered dishes that Daniel associated with wealth: lobster tails, filet mignon, truffle risotto, wine delivered from a vineyard, whose name he'd recognize but never pronounce correctly. I even arranged for a server, someone professional, to move quietly in the background. All of it had to feel authentic. All of it had to feed his illusion. Next came the jewelry. The pieces I had reclaimed: the sapphire brooch, the ruby ring, the diamond bracelet. I polished them until they caught the light like fire. I laid them out on the table not as heirlooms but as trophies, a display of what he had once stolen. I wanted him to see them, to recognize them, to feel the weight of what he had cast away. And finally, I prepared myself. I stood before the mirror in my bedroom, studying the woman who looked back at me. Margaret Whitman, 62, silver threading through her hair. Her face lined not just with age, but with years of love, loss, and sacrifice. I softened my makeup just enough to highlight my features, to give me the poise of someone who had nothing to prove, yet commanded the room by presence alone. I chose a dark dress, elegant but understated. The kind of thing a woman of means would wear, without apology. When I looked at myself, I no longer saw the invisible mother Daniel dismissed at the dinner table. I saw the figure he imagined: the patron, the benefactor, the force moving silently behind the scenes. And for the first time in months, I felt power course through me again. The night arrived quietly. The house glowed with candlelight, the air rich with the scent of butter and wine. The table was set, every plate gleaming, every glass waiting. The jewels glittered in the centerpiece like a crown of betrayal. Daniel arrived later than I had told him, of course, swaggering through the door with the arrogance of someone who believed time bent around him. He was dressed sharply, his suit freshly pressed, his smile rehearsed. "Mom," he said, barely glancing at me. "You didn't tell me we had company tonight." I smiled faintly, motioning toward the table. "We do." Bleh. His eyes widened as he took in the scene: the food, the wine, the glitter of jewels. His arrogance sharpened into excitement. He turned to me, his face lit with anticipation. "Is this it?" he asked breathlessly. "Is this who I think it is?" I tilted my head, allowing silence to hang between us. "Sit," I said softly. And he did, almost reverently. He smoothed his jacket, adjusted his cufflinks, and leaned forward as though he were about to be knighted. The server poured the wine. Daniel's eyes darted toward the doorway, as though expecting someone else to enter at any moment. "Where are they?" he whispered, his voice trembling with eagerness. I folded my hands in my lap, my expression calm. "They're already here." He blinked, confused. His gaze swept the room again, searching for a hidden guest, a shadow in the corner. And then, slowly, his eyes returned to me. I held his gaze, steady and unflinching. "Daniel," I said softly, "tonight, you will finally meet your anonymous millionaire." For a flicker of a second, disbelief crossed his face. Then it twisted into suspicion, then into a smirk. "You?" He laughed, shaking his head. "Come on, Mom, don't play games. You don't understand the circles I'm moving in. My patron." "Your patron," I cut in, my voice sharp enough to slice through his delusion, "is the same woman you stole from. The same woman whose jewels you paraded to the world, whose sacrifices you sold for nights of empty applause. Look at the table, Daniel. Look at what you threw away." His eyes fell on the jewels, recognition dawning, horror blooming. The mask of arrogance cracked. And I knew this was only the beginning. The room was silent, except for the faint crackle of the candles. Daniel's eyes darted across the table, tracing the glittering jewels one by one. The ruby ring, the sapphire brooch, the diamond bracelet. Pieces he had thought gone forever sold, exchanged, bartered away for scraps of admiration. And now here they were again, laid out before him like witnesses to his crime. His smirk faltered, the corners of his mouth twitching as though his face couldn't decide whether to laugh or grimace. This isn't possible, he stammered. I sold those. I. Yes, I interrupted quietly, my voice calm but iron beneath. You sold them. You stole from me, from your own mother, and every time you paraded them across an auction floor, every time you bragged to your friends about how clever you were, I was there. I was the one buying them back. His mouth opened, then closed again. His fingers tapped nervously against his wine glass. No, no, that doesn't make sense. You wouldn't. Wouldn't what? I leaned forward, my eyes fixed on him. Wouldn't protect what was mine. Wouldn't reclaim the memories of my husband, my grandmother, my life, while my own son pawned them for nights of vanity. He swallowed hard, his bravado slipping. So, you're the patron? I nodded once. The anonymous millionaire you've been bragging about. The one you thought was building your empire. It was me, Daniel. It has always been me. For a long moment, he just stared at me, his chest rising and falling too quickly. I could see the war in his eyes, anger battling shame, denial, wrestling with realization. His illusion, the castle he had built brick by brick out of lies, was crumbling. And beneath it, there was nothing left to hold him up. He slammed his hands on the table suddenly, rattling the glasses. Why? He shouted. Why would you do this to me? Why would you set me up like this? The words hit me like stones not because they were true, but because they revealed just how lost he was. Even in the moment of exposure, he tried to make himself the victim. I steadied my voice. I didn't set you up, Daniel. You did that yourself. You took what wasn't yours. You lied. You paraded stolen wealth, as if it made you powerful. All I did was give you the rope you kept asking for. You tied the knot. His face twisted, red with anger. You don't understand, I had to. I was drowning. Nobody respects a nobody, Mom. Nobody listens to the guy with nothing. I just wanted to be somebody. I felt the words pierce me, not with sympathy, but with clarity. There it was, the truth he had been hiding even from himself. He wasn't chasing wealth for wealth's sake. He was chasing validation, applause, a sense of worth. You thought money would make you somebody, I said softly. But Daniel, it doesn't. It only shows people who you already are. And right now, do you know what they see? He looked up at me, desperate. What? A thief, I whispered. A liar. A boy who traded his mother's love for champagne and shallow friends who won't remember his name when the money dries up. His breath hitched. For the first time in months, maybe years, I saw something crack in him. Not arrogance, not bravado, but fear. He slumped back in his chair, running both hands through his hair. I didn't mean, he muttered. I didn't think it would go this far. I held his gaze, unwavering. But it did, and now you have to live with it. The server, silent until now, entered to clear a plate. Daniel flinched, as though terrified the stranger had overheard everything. The mighty, patron-backed prodigy, reduced to a boy, ashamed of his own reflection. I let the silence stretch, heavy, suffocating. Then I pushed the brooch toward him across the table. Do you even remember when I wore this? He looked at it, his eyes wet. He shook his head. Your father gave it to me on our 10th anniversary. You were just a baby. He told me it was a symbol that even in hard times, beauty could survive if we cherished it. And you. My voice cracked despite myself. You sold it for a suit and a bottle of wine. He closed his eyes, face crumpling. I didn't. I didn't think about it that way. No, I said firmly. You didn't think at all. You wanted applause, and you didn't care whose heart you broke to get it. The anger that had sustained me began to soften into something more dangerous grief. I realized I wasn't just confronting a thief. I was confronting the loss of the boy I had raised, the son I had loved so fiercely, and I wasn't sure if anything of him remained. Daniel, I said quietly. Look at me. He lifted his eyes, red-rimmed, hollow. You've spent months worshipping a phantom, but here I am, flesh and blood. The woman who carried you, fed you, built a life for you. And you threw me away for an illusion. So tell me, was it worth it? The question hung in the air. He opened his mouth, closed it, and finally lowered his head into his hands. He didn't answer. And maybe that was the answer. The mask was off. The fantasy was gone. All that remained was a son stripped bare, trembling beneath the weight of his own betrayal. But the story wasn't over, because now I had to decide. Would I forgive him? Or would I let the ruin of his choices stand as his punishment? That decision would come later. For now, it was enough that the truth had finally been spoken. Daniel sat at the table like a man struck by lightning, alive, breathing, but stunned into paralysis. His fingers twitched against the glass stem of his wine. His lips moved as if forming excuses that never fully left his mouth. For the first time, in a long while, my son looked small. Not the swaggering, self-proclaimed man with connections, but a boy cornered by the truth. The jewels glimmered between us, silent judges in the candlelight. They spoke more eloquently than I ever could. You betrayed her. You sold us. You cannot hide from what you've done. Finally, Daniel's voice broke the silence, rough and trembling. I didn't think it would come to this. I leaned back, my eyes steady. What did you think it would come to, Daniel? That you'd keep selling piece after piece, spinning lies until there was nothing left? That your phantom patron would carry you forever? His hands clenched into fists. I just wanted to prove myself. I was tired of being nobody. Everyone else, my friends, they all had something. Money, status, a name. And me? I was just your son. Living in your house, eating your food, watching you polish jewels I thought I'd never touch. His words landed like blows. Just your son. As though that role, his only true inheritance, was something beneath him. So you stole, I said quietly. He flinched. I borrowed. Don't, I snapped, sharper now. Don't you dare dress this in softer words. You didn't borrow. You didn't ask. You took. You lied. You humiliated me in my own home. Call it what it is. His face reddened, tears threatening at the corners of his eyes. He slammed his fist against the table. Fine. I stole. Are you happy? The sound echoed through the house. The server froze at the edge of the room, then silently retreated, leaving us alone in the storm. I didn't move. Didn't flinch. I simply watched him crumble. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. I didn't want to hurt you, he whispered through broken sobs. I just thought, if I could become someone important, you'd finally be proud of me. That confession pierced deeper than the theft itself. I stared at him, my anger faltering against the rawness of his words. Proud? Did he truly believe I wasn't already proud before the lies, before the betrayal, before he traded love for applause? Daniel, I said softly, my voice trembling now. Do you think I wasn't proud of you when you graduated? Even if it wasn't with honors? Do you think I wasn't proud when you comforted me after your father died? When you stayed by my side through my grief? I was proud because you were my son, not because of jewels or money. He lifted his head slowly, his face streaked with tears, eyes swollen. Then why didn't it feel like enough? I had no answer. Or maybe the answer was too simple, too brutal. Because enough is something we choose, not something given. He had chosen to measure himself against others, to chase what glitters instead of what endures. You wanted the world to clap for you, I whispered. And you forgot that my hands had been clapping all along. The silence after that was suffocating. He trembled, his chest heaving with sobs, but I did not move to comfort him. Not yet. He needed to sit in the wreckage of his own choices. He needed to see the shards for what they were. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, he wiped his face with the back of his hand, trying to pull himself together. His voice was hoarse when he spoke again. Please, Mom, don't tell anyone. Don't ruin me. I'll fix it. I promise. I'll get the money back. I'll make it right. Exit. I leaned forward, my tone calm but unyielding. You can't buy back trust. You can't repair betrayal with promises. You can't erase the fact that you looked me in the eyes and lied again and again. This isn't about money anymore, Daniel. It's about who you've become. His lower lip quivered, his gaze darting to the jewels as though they might shield him. Then, what do you want from me? What did I want? Forgiveness? Justice? Revenge? I searched my own heart in that moment, feeling the weight of every sleepless night, every empty safe, every cruel word he had thrown at me. What I wanted was impossible to go back to before. To have my son as he was, not as he had become. So I said the only thing I could. I want you to face the truth. I want you to see what you've done, not hide behind excuses. Ahem. He dropped his gaze to the floor, his body sagging as though the fight had drained out of him. For the first time, he looked defeated not by me, but by himself. The collapse was complete. The arrogant facade had crumbled, the lies had dissolved, and all that remained was a boy who thought he needed jewels to shine. I watched him in silence, my heart heavy. This was not triumph. This was tragedy. But sometimes, tragedy is the only teacher strong enough to pierce the armor of arrogance. And maybe, just maybe, it was the only way to save what was left of him. The house was quiet when Daniel finally left the table, retreating to his room with shoulders slumped, his arrogance stripped bare. The jewels still glittered in the candlelight, untouched, like silent witnesses to everything that had been spoken and everything that could never be unsaid. I remained where I was, my hands folded in my lap, staring at the remnants of the dinner I had orchestrated, the wine glasses half full, the plates of food gone cold, the candle wax dripping in steady streams. It looked less like a feast now, and more like the aftermath of a trial. And that was what it had been. A trial of loyalty, of truth, of love stretched thin until it nearly snapped. But a verdict had not yet been reached. That part was mine to decide. I rose slowly, gathering the jewels back into their velvet cases. My fingers lingered on each one, the ruby ring, the sapphire brooch, the pearl necklace. They were more than gems. They were memory, sacrifice, history, and Daniel had reduced them to fuel for his hunger. Yet as I closed each case, locking them away once more, I asked myself, was he truly the only one guilty? Or had I failed him too? I thought of all the times I had polished these pieces in front of him, telling stories of their worth. Had I unwittingly taught him that value lived in sparkle rather than in love? I thought of how I had tried to protect him from every hardship, how I had given instead of letting him earn. Had I raised a man who believed the world owed him because I had never let him feel what it meant to owe himself? The questions gnawed at me, even as my anger burned. Betrayal never falls entirely on one side. It is born of choices, yes, but also of silences, of lessons not taught, of wounds left untended. I walked down the hall and stood outside his room. Through the door, I could hear muffled sobs, the sound of a man unraveling. My hand hovered over the doorknob. Every instinct as a mother screamed at me to open it, to sit beside him, to hold him as I once did when nightmares chased him in the dark. But I didn't. Because this time, the nightmare was of his own making. Instead, I whispered through the wood, Daniel, you've lost more than jewels tonight. You've lost my trust, and that is harder to win back than any auction. Silence followed, broken only by a quiet sniffle. I returned to the dining room and began extinguishing the candles one by one. The darkness grew, soft and steady, until only one flame remained. I sat again, watching it flicker, thinking about what legacy I wanted to leave behind. Forgiveness is easy to speak but hard to live. Anger is easy to hold but heavy to carry. What I felt was something in between an ache that would not vanish, a wound that would not heal quickly. But wounds are not the same as death. And as long as breath filled my lungs, as long as Daniel still had the capacity for shame, there was a chance, however small, that something of him could be saved. The final candle flickered, its flame bending as though about to surrender. I reached forward, cupping my hand behind it, protecting it from the draft. And in that moment, I understood. My role as his mother was not to erase his mistakes, nor to destroy him for making them. It was to stand in that fragile space in between to guard what little spark of him remained, while letting the darkness of his choices teach him what light truly meant. I would not disown him, but neither would I absolve him. His redemption, if it ever came, would not be a gift from me. It would be something he would have to carve out himself, one painful step at a time. As I finally blew out the candle, the room fell into darkness. But within me, a quiet resolve glowed. My legacy would not be jewels or wealth. My legacy would be truth. And truth, once revealed, cannot be stolen. Sometimes, betrayal does not come from enemies at our gates, but from the very children we raised with open hands. It is a wound unlike any other, a cut made not by strangers, but by family, by love twisted into greed. I had spent months watching Daniel lose himself, feeding his illusion until it consumed him. And in the end, it wasn't the jewels he destroyed. It was the trust between us, the bond that once felt unbreakable. But as I sat in the quiet of my home that night, I realized something. Silence is not weakness. Patience is not surrender. By becoming his anonymous millionaire, I had turned his fantasy into his mirror. I had forced him to see what he had become. What comes next, I cannot say. Perhaps he will change. Perhaps he will fall further. That choice rests with him now. As for me, I will continue to live not for applause, not for illusion, but for the truth. Because truth endures, even when jewels are sold, even when trust is shattered. And if there is one lesson Daniel will carry, it is this. You cannot buy worth with lies. You cannot sell love for status. And you cannot outrun the truth.